Compression is what happens when something that once required space, time, and effort becomes condensed into something smaller, faster, and more immediate. Think about music. There was a time when listening to a single album required driving to a store, purchasing a physical record, bringing it home, and placing it on a turntable. Today, that entire experience lives inside a single application on your phone. The space didn't disappear, it collapsed inward. Or photography. Film used to run out after 36 pictures. Every shot had weight, it mattered. You didn't want to waste one. Now, you carry every photo you've ever taken in your pocket, searchable in seconds. Or a time-lapse video. What unfolds over the course of an entire season can now be watched in 10 seconds. The growth still happens. We just experience it in a fraction of the time. This is compression. And what we refer to as white-collar work is the next layer to experience compression. Let me bring this into focus with a real-life event from this week. On Tuesday at 4 p.m., I received a call from a CHRO preparing for a Friday town hall. Her communications team had been working for 2 weeks on 2 short videos intended to depict the organization's current state and its future direction. The work wasn't landing. The moment was too important to share something that felt unfinished, not aligned with her vision. She asked a simple question. Isn't there some kind of AI tool that can do this? 3 hours later, she had first drafts of both videos. Wednesday morning, we reviewed them together. Minor adjustments. Wednesday afternoon, revised versions were delivered. Wednesday evening, one final round of edits. By Thursday morning, she had polished videos ready for Friday's town hall. 2 weeks of work compressed into roughly 8 hours of work. This story continues at the end. This isn't a story about efficiency. It is about a structural reset. It is compression playing out right now. The distance between idea and execution is shrinking, and this pattern will only intensify. Timelines are shortening. Feedback loops are tightening. Leverage is expanding in fewer hands. The real bottleneck is no longer tool adoption. It is our assumptions about how work is supposed to unfold. This week, 3 stories from inside the AI ecosystem all point toward the same underlying force. Work is compressing. Careers are compressing. And many leaders are still operating as if the old pacing rules still apply. But before we jump into the signals, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work. And with it, so to it, will change the way we need to lead. Here are 3 stories from this week that point to this massive shift. Story 1, Mustafa Suleyman, Compression of Capability. In his interview this week, Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman described what is coming not as a single dominant intelligence, but as an explosion of them. There are going to be many, many different lineages of model, he said. Creating a new model is going to be like creating a podcast or writing a blog. Pause on that. Suleyman is not a casual commentator. Before leading Microsoft AI, he co-founded DeepMind and authored The Coming Wave, a book outlining how AI and synthetic biology would reshape institutions, economies, and governance. In that book, he warned that the defining challenge of this era would not simply be building powerful systems, it would be containing and integrating them. For most of the past decade, building frontier AI required massive labs, rare talent, and billions in infrastructure. Historically, cutting-edge intelligence was centralized. He is suggesting that this, too, is compressing. The ability to create AI systems, to shape them, fine-tune them, deploy them for specific organizational needs, is becoming more accessible. What once required a research lab may increasingly resemble what we think about currently as content creation, accessible to individuals and small teams who understand how to build. At the same time, he predicted that within 12-18 months, most professional, computer-based tasks could reach human-level automation. This is a move away from what we are working with now, where AI assists us. In the near future, it will execute without us. Software engineers already report spending less time writing code and more time reviewing and directing AI-generated output. The capability compression is the shrinking distance between the builder and the tool. If creating a model begins to resemble creating a podcast or writing a blog, then the differentiator is no longer access. It is assumptions. The question shifts from, will AI replace me? To, what can I build with it? In a compressed environment, relevance belongs to those who learn to shape the tools, to orchestrate, adapt, and design with them, rather than standing outside them. The signal. People who learn to build inside this shift will experience compression, not as displacement, but as leverage. Story number 2, Matt Schumann, Compression of Execution. In a viral post this week titled, Something Big is Happening, AI co-founder of Otherside AI, Matt Schumann compared today's moment to February 2020. Do you remember February 2020? We heard about these rumors of people on the other side of the world wearing masks, having to get their temperature taken before they entered a store. But we thought, that's over there, it will never happen here. By March, though, only a few weeks later, our entire lives changed. His claim is that something similar is happening now inside technology, and most of us are still thinking, oh, that won't come for my job. He describes using the newest AI models to build fully functional applications in hours, work that would have required entire teams only a couple years ago. What once involved back and forth iteration now often requires simple direction. I find the comments to Schumann's article important signals of where people's mental models are for what is coming. Comments suggesting this is a marketing ploy to get people to use AI are common. Others say it's clickbait. The article is worth the read. 2 weeks ago, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei published a similar warning about what's emerging. 2 leading AI founders, 2 weeks, same message. Don't forget how fast life changed from February 2020 to March of 2020. We are approaching something similar, and our assumptions about what is approaching might not be keeping up. The signal. As execution compresses, the hierarchy we have built will begin to compress as well. And story number 3, Nate Jones, Compression of Roles and Time. There's a creator on YouTube I've found myself regularly listening to over the past couple months, Nate B. Jones. He does something that I find insightful. He translates model updates, benchmark results, and AI product releases into practical implications. Not just what changed, but how to think about using it, how to think about your career inside it. A post from this week really caught my attention. He described what he calls collapsing futures. What he means isn't destruction. He means compression. He argues that 2 forms of compression are unfolding at the same time. The first is horizontal. Compression across roles: engineer, product manager, marketer, analyst, designer, operator. Roles that once required distinct skill stacks are converging toward a shared meta-competency, directing AI agents toward outcomes. Your domain expertise still matters. In fact, it matters deeply. But it is no longer sufficient on its own. The differentiator becomes your ability to translate that expertise into AI-orchestrated workflows. In other words, knowing marketing is foundational. Knowing how to deploy AI agents to execute marketing is leverage. The second compression he describes is temporal, compression across time. For decades, we've been trained to think in 5-year arcs, learn a skill, apply it, climb the ladder, build leverage slowly. That timeline is shrinking. The half-life of skills is rapidly shortening. He shared a metaphor that stuck with me. Learning AI is like riding a bike. When a child is learning to ride, the instinct is to go slowly because it feels safer. But stability actually only increases with speed. The point here, jump in, try these emerging tools, don't wait. In this environment, waiting for the technology to settle is not neutral. It is irrelevancy. The signal. The people who lean in early compound their learning. The ones who hesitate find themselves constantly recalibrating to a moving target. Across all 3 signals, the pattern is consistent. Capability is condensing. Execution is accelerating. Roles are converging. And timelines are collapsing. But what makes this moment destabilizing is not speed alone. It is what compression exposes. When the distance between idea and execution shrinks, when leverage expands to smaller teams, and when AI can execute work that once defined an entire role, something deeper than work begins to shift. Authority shifts. Identity shifts. Assumptions about how long things take and who is required begin to erode. What once felt fixed begins to feel negotiable. Compression expands what is possible faster than our internal thinking models can update, and the gap between what is now possible and what we still believe is possible is where friction is beginning to surface. Returning to the CHRO story from above illustrates this clearly. On Thursday, after we finalized the town hall videos, she shared that she had already engaged a creative agency to produce a marketing video for a conference in April. The cost was $24,000. That felt reasonable to her. That is what polished conference videos cost. That is how the system works. She asked if I would create a version using AI tools so she could compare. I did. The result was produced for less than 1/10 the cost. The price difference is interesting, but it is not the real story. The more revealing element was the assumption underneath it. The belief that high quality requires a studio, that this type of work requires this type of vendor, that certain outputs necessarily demand certain timelines and budgets. None of those assumptions were written down. They lived in language. We'll need to engage a vendor. This will take at least 2 weeks. We'll have to get on the agency calendar. Corporate language flows easily and often unconsciously. We repeat phrases without noticing what they imply about time, cost, authority, and capability. Language silently carries belief, and belief establishes boundaries of what is possible. For years, those boundaries were invisible because the environment moved slowly enough to support them. Now the environment is moving faster, and compression is revealing where those boundaries no longer reflect reality. This is where the conversation becomes more human. When possibility expands rapidly, it does not always register as opportunity. Often, it registers as threat, not intellectually, but in our nervous system. You can observe this in leadership teams discussing AI experimentation. A CFO might say, "We need to be careful about running too many AI pilots." Sometimes that statement reflects thoughtful risk management, but sometimes it reflects a nervous system reacting to uncertainty and loss of control. Compression, by nature, destabilizes predictability. It shortens feedback cycles, changes leverage, and introduces ambiguity about roles and expertise. When predictability erodes, the body's natural instinct is to seek stability, certainty. In language, stability often sounds like process. It sounds like approval. It sounds like familiar timelines. Let's not move too fast. We need a formal review. We'll revisit this next quarter. Again, sometimes those statements are wise, but sometimes they are protective reflexes disguised as responsible leadership. When leaders are overloaded or unsettled, they default to inherited assumptions because inherited assumptions feel safe and familiar. Compression reveals those reflexes because it accelerates the environment beyond the comfort zone of existing mental models. It forces a confrontation with the language we use and the beliefs embedded within the language. This is why compression is not merely operational. It is psychological. It is deeply human. It touches identity, authority, and control. Leadership in this environment is not primarily about adopting tools faster than competitors. It is about cultivating enough internal steadiness to question one's own inherited assumptions. It requires the capacity to ask difficult questions in real time. Is this caution strategic or is it protective? Is this process necessary or is it familiar? Is this timeline real or is it simply how we have always described it? For more than a century, our leadership systems rewarded predictability, hierarchy, and control. Questioning norms was rarely incentivized. Having answers equated with competence. Compression exposes the limits of that model. The structure remains, but navigating it now requires a higher level of awareness than it once did. As intelligence becomes abundant and execution accelerates, the constraints shift. It is no longer access to AI capability that will differentiate organizations. It is the awareness to see where outdated assumptions are limiting what is now possible. The organizations that will navigate this period well will not simply be the fastest adopters of tools. They will be the ones willing to examine the phrases they use, the timelines they assume, the processes they defend, and ask whether those assumptions still hold. Because when time compresses and capability expands, the risk is not that growth stops. The risk is that we continue operating inside yesterday's mental model while the environment has already moved on. Compression is not asking us to abandon structure. It is asking us to see it clearly. If this resonates, join us as we explore what it means to lead, live, and work in an era of accelerating change.